Welcome to I'm Telling HR, the go-to podcast for ambitious HR professionals who are looking to shake up the status quo, make a real impact, and fast-track their careers. Today, we're joined by Joe Cangelosi, founder and president of Tee Lex, specializing in business solutions for creative service firms. With over 25 years in event and TV production, Joe has built and sold 2 companies and focuses on streamlining project costing, compliance, and payroll. In this episode, we'll be talking about common myths within HR, contractors, and wage and hour compliance. Let's dive in.
There's still a lot of confusion around hiring contractors and when and how that's allowed. And then kind of part and parcel in the same thing is overtime exemption. I think there's still a lot of misconception around when overtime exemption is allowed. What does it mean to have a salaried employer or employee? Everything that's related to those 2 issues and stems from those 2 issues. For OT exemption specifically, I think that people just assume that they can pay anyone a salary that they want. I know a lot of employers that I talk to conceptually confuse an overtime exemption and someone being full-time. So like very, very frequently, I'll take on a new client and say, how many salaried employees do you have? How many exempt versus non-exempt employees do you have? And they say, oh, we only have full-time employees, right? So it implies to me that that means that they think that anyone who's full-time can be paid a salary. And even in 2025, even fairly large companies will tell me that. And on the contractor side, it's sort of the same flavor, right? People just believe that they can hire any contractor at any time to do anything. And that's really not the case, especially in California. I wish that people understood the difference between exempt and non-exempt employees, which I know can definitely be confusing for some people. But I think that for a lot of employers, there's just this thing in their mind where they think, oh, well, as long as someone is full-time, then I just pay them a salary. The concept of, work tests, salary thresholds, like these are things that we understand, but employers, I think, certainly entrepreneurial type employers, they don't really understand that, we need to actually consider the work that people are doing. Like what is the actual task that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, that we need to evaluate their work before we know whether or not we can classify them as exempt from overtime. And then the funny thing is that, as soon as you mention the salary threshold to an employer who is not savvy about this, then they immediately think that the solution is to just give the person a raise, not realizing that they still haven't addressed the underlying work test, which you're supposed to pass before you even get to the salary exemption. So I think I just kind of wish that employers had a clue about this. And even when I educate them, they seem to immediately forget it. So like, for example, I get offer letters all the time from people that I've been through this educational process with. And the offer letters, regardless of the work test, don't even meet the salary threshold. Happens all the time. I probably get 1 a week. I definitely have been up against the precipice of if they had an employee that was unhappy, if they had a disgruntled employee, they would have been in a really bad shape. I've taken over clients that have, multiple junior employees in salaries well below the threshold that wouldn't pass the work test on their best day. I've seen every kind of wage and hour violation that you can imagine, whether it's rounding, whether it's record keeping, you name it. But I've been very lucky in the sense that I have not actually seen it go completely off the rails. Knock wood. I probably get an offer letter every week, every other week that doesn't match the salary, that doesn't meet the salary threshold. And then I have to call them back and have the same conversation with them again. And this is the reason why we make sure that we check the offer letters before they go to candidates, because we find all kinds of problems in them. It's important to know that those separate thresholds exist. We are living in a golden age of mid-market software. I mean, when we look at human capital management software, accounting software, project control software, what's available now, the breadth, the depth, the price point compared to 10 years ago, and also the complexity, right? I mean, we think about legacy human capital management processes that, are $100,000 implementation. You need developers to write the time off policies. I mean, those days ended very quickly. So, and not only with Rippling, I mean, I try and keep a pretty close eye on the marketplace just so we know what else is out there. Just having better tools at our disposal so that we can spend the human element actually interacting people and providing them with a good service experience. And then all of the other junk, just the more and more of that junk that gets handled by the tech, the better. Understand what the work test is, understand what salary threshold applies to you, and stop trying to get around it. Take a full breath and understand what the rules are and then apply them to your situation. Stop just trying to think about how to get around them, because the risk that you're taking by doing that is not worth the risk. Like tracking time, like, yes, if you end up with an hourly employee, yes, they have to track time. Maybe it's a drag, but guess what? It's 2025. We have great software for people to track their time, and we have great payroll software that can run hourly payroll. The complexity of payroll, I mean, it's very easy, when you work in film and television or you work in the events industry, there are all these third-party payroll services. And, you think, oh, well, those guys just run the payroll, we do the timesheets, and it's really not that big a deal. Well, when you don't have that third-party payroll, who's handling the garnishments, that's handling the taxation, that's handling the deductions, that's handling all of these other things, when all of a sudden you're faced with the reality of, what it takes for a small business owner to deal with all that stuff, I definitely have a huge newfound respect for everything that's related to, the employment life cycle generally is a complex animal, but anytime it touches money, it gets much more complicated very quickly. And I definitely did not appreciate that at the outset. Compliance writ large, especially state compliance, what we deal with in California in terms of wage and hour, and not only the complexity of the compliance itself, but also the penalties for non-compliance are not only greater in dollar amounts, but they're also more complex in the way that they're applied. And there are, generally speaking, more enforcement actions, both from the agency side and from the employee litigation side. I definitely had a real eye-opening when I decided to wade into this space. Fortunately, I was very fortunate that I had really experienced HR leaders that brought me into it. It was a big learning curve for me to just understand how broad and how deep the topic of HR compliance really went.